Throughout history, people have used torture devices to punish their enemies and those accused of crimes. They've also used torture as means to elicit confessions or convince a victim to give up other people's names, despite the fact that torture doesn't produce reliable information. Humans can be very imaginative when it comes to defeating each other. During the Middle Ages, when extracting confessions, punishing offenders, or performing executions was tough, humans invented some ruthless medieval torture methods. Torture methods were used on victims to get information about their crimes. The laws and local customs didn't limit torturing the victims. Different types of torturers were used up for different kinds of crimes. Sometimes, skilled torturers were hired to use these methods of agonizing pain during torture. Each of the medieval torture methods were very brutal. Here's a list of the top 5 most terrifying and worst torture methods used between the 5th to late 15th centuries. Number 1. The Brazen Bull. The Brazen Bull is an ancient mythical torture device used by Evilest, a tyrant who ruled a part of Sicily in the 6th century BCE. It consisted of a life-size bronze bull that was hollow on the inside and had a door on the outside. The torturer would place a victim inside and light a fire under the bull. The fire would roast the victim to death, while an acoustic system on the bull made the victim's screams sound like bull noises to those on the outside. The story of Evilest and the Brazen Bull comes from the Greek historian Judas Cradle, who lived about 500 years after these events had supposedly taken place. The story, which Italian poet and philosopher Dante referenced in the Inferno, is likely a myth, or at least highly embellished. Number 2. The Wooden Horse. The wooden horse, also known as the Spanish donkey, is a medieval torture tool believed to have been used between the 16th and 18th centuries in Europe. It was used by the ancient Greeks to punish their prisoners by suspending them in a seated position on a wooden horse frame with weights hung from both legs. It was believed that the rocking motion of the wooden frame caused unbearable agony due to severe wounds and would eventually cause death. The most popular design had an upholstered horse body with a saddle on sorts, which held the victim's limbs and prevented them from sliding down or being pulled up during use. This seat featured 2 stirrups connected to a yoke on either side, allowing 2 or more people to hold it in place while another could perform the procedure. In some versions, wooden pegs were along each side of the yoke meant to secure legs or arms if desired. The wooden horse was usually positioned over an open flame so that extreme heat could be directed at the targeted areas, such as the stomach, arms, legs, and feet. Hot pincers were sometimes inserted between the joints for severe pain. The weight, combined with the flames, would slowly weaken victims until they cried out in pain, often resulting in confessions or pleas of mercy. Ultimately, this cruel device slowly tortured its victims until death finally came as a relief from unbearable agony. Number 3. Rat torture. Do you know that in the medieval era, rats ate victims alive? Rat torture is on top when it comes to the worst torture methods. Rats could eat anything. Anything means humans too. In the medieval world, rats were placed inside a small cage positioned against the victim's abdomen. Then the cage was heated from the outside using candles, hot coals, or flaming sticks. It used to make the rats agitated. To escape the cage, the rats have to find their way outside, and the victim's skin, being the softest surface, used to attract them. Rats would dig their way into the bowels of the victim. Number 4. Saw torture. This is another worst torture method in the medieval era that was used to dice the victims in half while hanging upside down. Hanging the victim used to increase the blood flow to the head, causing a slow death and conserving blood. The victims were sawed in half vertically or horizontally, or piece by piece. This method was simple, cheap, and effective, but equally torturous. It was mostly used by the Romans, Greeks, and Chinese, and had its mention in the Bible. Number 5. Judas's Cradle. Judas's Cradle, also known as Judas's Chair, is the last in our terrifying list of medieval torture methods. It was an Italian invention and was very cruel. In this method, the victim was tied to a pyramid-shaped seat using ropes, and the point was inserted into the anus or the vagina. The victim was tortured because of the intense pressure and stretching of the orifice, causing permanent damage to the internal organs. This method also ripped off the muscle tissues, which would later cause infection. In some cases, weight was added to the rope to increase the effect and cause of death by impalement. In summary, while medieval torture methods were no fun for victims, they can be morbidly entertaining for readers. Sometimes, these methods were misused to manipulate accused witches and dissenters into confessing the crimes they didn't commit. I'm glad we weren't born in that dark age or medieval era and collectively moved past these evilest torture methods. We hope you also found this ride to the list of worst methods to torture victims painful and amusing.